I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Laura Osborne. Laura, or Auntie Laura to me, is my aunt. For as long as I can remember, she has been an active reader. She has given me so many great reading recommendations over the years and has been very active in the book club in the past. So I knew I wanted to ask her to be on the show. So welcome to the show, Auntie Laura.
Thank you, Kara, for having me. This is a really great experience for me, and I'm so happy to do this for you.
Yay! I'm so glad to have you. Well, why don't we start how we usually do on the show here with telling me a little bit about your reading life.
Well, I started probably reading after college, just in the summers, because I am an educator and I did have the summers off. So during the summer months, I was able to pick up books, to read and whatever else, just light romantic stuff or something that kind of caught my fancy. Then, as I retired after I left education, what I would call a lot of teachers that I were familiar with, we decided to do a book club. And with the book club, we had probably about 8 people, and once a month or once every 6 weeks, we would read a different book given to us, and we'd go out, and research what books we really wanted to read. So every 6 weeks we read something, which was different. Each person in the group had a different kind of genre or whatever else. So that really started me reading a lot of books. I mean, that went on probably almost until the pandemic. And then after the pandemic came, we kind of disbanded because we being, social distanced and whatever else, we could not meet as a group anymore, and Zoom gets tiresome after a while. I think people were not really, at the beginning it was great, but at the end, it just got old. So we kind of disbanded, which was kind of a bad thing to do, but in a way it kind of gave me my interest to continue reading on my own, so I've tried to do that as I've gotten, away from the book club.
Yeah, what a great way to be introduced to the different genres. I feel like that's a big impetus of why I've started this show, is just to be introduced to different genres and different books. And what a great way with each of you contributing to what your readings might be for your book club to do that.
Yes, because we're a very varied group of individuals, different educators in different disciplines, and reading. Some of the gals, wanted to read mysteries, some wanted to read historical. So it really gave us quite a variety of different reads, which was great, because it expands your library of thought of what, you should be reading or would maybe never read if somebody else didn't suggest it. So it was a great experience, to say the least.
Yeah, what a great way to expand our horizons, expand our reading choices. And I think that's great. That is one of my goals for 2023, for sure.
Yes.
So what genres do you prefer to read?
Well, I think I'm probably more historical fiction, where it actually deals with events that have maybe occurred, such as the Holocaust. There's also, I've read a lot about Western history, because we're now, going between 2 homes. We're out in Arizona as well as here in Illinois. So it really has it's opened up my thought about different parts of the country, and different events that have occurred within our country historically and whatever else. However, I do like to read sometimes what they call the romantic end
Yeah.
which is really, you see those books, and you kind of go, who reads those? Well, guess what? I have read several of those too. So I would say I'm very varied about things that I'm interested in. I try not to put myself into a corner. I try to expand my brain enough to know that, there are other genres that I can read and whatever else. I just
Do,
won't read any more college books. I'm done reading
true.
educational college books.
Yeah, the dry material, no more. Thank you.
Yes, definitely.
Do you find that you're maybe a bit of a mood reader where you kind of pick things up based off how you're feeling, or because you're such a varied reader, like how do you choose what you're going to pick up next?
Well, I guess it has to do with I do read a lot in the newspapers about the book section, that does come up, what
Hmm.
books are now people are reading, or in what the New York Times, says as their bestsellers, that kind of thing. So I think it's basically more along those lines that I do. I don't think I'm really a mood reader. I think I, I educate myself to look at what is really current at the time
Hmm.
or what authors are really coming up. And then I pick and choose from there. Um, when it was hot to read the Twilight series, I read those. I mean,
Yeah.
it just seemed like that's how I usually pick things. It's not my mood at all. I think it's just more just being educated on what other people are reading and what might be the hot topic for the duration of whatever. So,
Yeah, I'm very similar where I don't know that I read the charts per se because I like to see that things persist in the hype that is behind them.
hmm
And if it persists to like year two of the book's release, then I'm like, okay, it's time to pick this up now. Like it stood the test of time a little bit, and the hoopla that it
hmm
received. So because sometimes I feel like I've read the bestsellers and it just didn't fit for me. But if it stood the test of time a little bit and maintained its hype, then I'm like, okay, yep, time to pick it up.
well, it's true, because I actually the same way, if it doesn't really pique my interest, I won't read it. It's got to really have some kind of catch to it.
Hmm.
But I can say that I've gone back and read like Jane Austen, which is hard to believe. Most people, they know her more from the movies and things like that they've seen on TV with Emma and, the series. But
Hmm.
just reading her book is entirely different, with, Hollywood sanitizes things sometimes or makes it fit however they think it should fit on the small screen. But reading in more in depth, it's really important, to see her, how she put together her story and what she was actually writing about for that time. So,
That's actually an episode that I'm like I need to book someone that does is going to come talk to me about the classics. I've been a part of a book club and they actually do try to read more of the classics, and going back, being outside of high school, being outside of the school realm and reading it for leisure, I've actually found more than I remember that they are very readable. Like the language is not as hard as I was remembering from back in my
mhm.
school days, but maybe just because I'm, further along in my reading journey, that it doesn't seem so daunting to pick that up. But I have found how much I've really loved them. And again, that they're easier to read than I was imagining.
Right. And I think that's true with a lot of readers. You can't be afraid of looking at, there's different ways that authors, compose themselves, and the language is one of them, but there's also, sometimes their prose are done in short stories
Hmm.
instead of, you have to kind of follow along, put the pieces together. And I think as a reader, you got to keep your mind open to those kinds of styles, that you might be interested one of these days, exploring that. So it's important.
And there's a reason they have stood the test of time. Back to
Yes.
standing the test of time. There's a reason why those books are still circulating.
Oh, definitely, for sure. And I think that really says a lot about, literature as a whole. It's very important, I think, that we go back as even as a society and a civilization and read some of those classics, from way back when, to understand ourselves and our society as it's evolved over the last centuries or so. So it's
That's a great
important.
point. Yes, that's a wonderful point. So, with your retirement life, I'm imagining in my mind's eye that you have all of this time to read, but I know life still goes on. So, you still have things on your to-do list and things that you have to accomplish. So, how and when do you find time to read in your day?
Usually, the best time for me is to read is at nighttime. When I have, probably after supper time, then if I, decide to read right before I go to bed, it usually relaxes me in a
Hmm.
way that is different. Um, Usually in the morning and, that kind of time frame and during the day, I am busy, even though I'm retired, there are things that I'm doing, as a whole daily tasks or, playing golf or doing whatever, my recreational things are. So at nighttime is usually the best time for me, usually after dinner is when I can probably grab enough time to read maybe for an hour and a half, before I go to bed. And then that's about all I can. Sometimes I've in the past, sometimes when I've have a full day where I have nothing on my calendar, in other words, that does happen to retired people every a lot more than usual. Um, I usually can spend, if I'm really into the book, then I can really spend, start reading in the morning, break for lunch and then read some time in the afternoon and then I'm, good. So I can spend an whole day if I really want to, too. So I have that luxury, as being a retired teacher. So that makes a big difference.
That is great. I feel like I remember staying up really late at night because I'm like, oh, I want to finish this book. Once you get pulled into a book. But if I'm being honest, since having kids, I don't have the energy. I'm usually falling asleep within 2 pages these days. So I'm like, I don't get those big chunks of time to read unless I wake up much earlier than my children, which is my MO to do.
Yes,
So
yeah. Well, I think each reader has to find their own niche of time. I really do to carve out, where you're going to do your reading and you have some quiet time, because it's too hard for me. Actually, it's really too hard for me to get distracted when there's too many things going on or I'm not clear in my head, to
mhm.
spend the time. Then I have some trouble with it. But I think every reader has to find that little niche, where their time is.
And that's why it'd be such a good for you being at the end of the day, because then your tasks are accomplished. So you're like, I can
Yes.
really just devote my time and my attention to this the book that I'm reading,
Hmm.
because I'm not worried about the tasks at hand or getting the day started and all of that.
Yeah, it does. It for me, it makes a huge amount of difference, because like you say, usually I'm a very early morning rise person, but I like to get moving with my tasks, whether it be grocery shopping or doing shopping or getting that kind of out of the way or planning meals or doing whatever. I like to do that more in the morning. In the afternoon, not so much. I know that I need that downtime, after dinner. So I don't want to plan for anything in the next day. It's kind of like, nope, need to take some time to myself.
Yeah, and
So,
that's a big part of creating a habit as well for those listening is doing the tasks that you want to accomplish at the same time each day is a big way to create a habit in doing that.
mhm,
So, just a
I
little
agree with
side
that.
note.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's for sure.
All right. Well, you have prepared a very interesting book flight for us today that I'm very excited to talk about. Would you like to go ahead and tell us about our first book that we're going to be sampling?
And that is Olive Kittredge, by author Elizabeth Strout. Um, this book is really a very interesting way of how she wrote it. First of all, it's done in what I would call a short story version. It revolves around a main character, Olive Kittredge, who is a retired school teacher who actually is very, what I would say, she kind of deplores the changes that are going on in her town and in the world at large. She's not what I would call, she's a little bit abrupt at times in her responses to how she interacts with certain characters within the book. And that also includes her family. But the good thing about the author is that she's brought her around to a deeper understanding of herself and her life. Sometimes when she interacts with people, the other characters, it's painful. And it's also honest to a ruthless point as to
Mm-hmm.
how she's viewing those individuals. But I think I read a little bit about the author, why she wrote it this way, where Olive was so abrasive at times, or, dealing with, why these characters were doing this and not understanding it, what was her actual hope with, the
Mm-hmm.
readers. And I guess it was just to give us a larger understanding of people are different, and we're all human, and things happen to us, that other people sometimes can't understand because they're quick to judge,
Mm-hmm.
what why this person is doing this, instead of looking at the situation and trying to figure out exactly why the person is responding this way. And she was also quick to make excuses for people, as to why they were that way, whether or not that assumption was true or not. She
Mm-hmm.
still kind of did it within her interactions with people. So
And I feel like we're all wired this
we're
way. So
all
I feel like it is a very real life depiction.
it
I remember
is.
thinking that as I read this book.
Yeah, it's very true to life. And I think a lot of us don't realize that we are all wired that way, that we're similar, and we all fail and succeed at relationships in any kind of manner. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it does happen to all of us. There's going to be success stories with people, and there's going to be failures with people. But I think that's really, it was just kind of was a way for me to look at myself as to how I overreact, or how I come to understand other people. You know, Sometimes I forget that people are human and they do have frailties, and we have to really look beyond maybe what the situation is as to what they're really feeling. So,
And don't you love when books really make you do that introspection?
yes. And I
Yeah.
think that probably was, probably was my favorite thing, is the saying that, no one is perfect in every facet of their lives. They're not going to be. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not either. And either is Olive Kittredge when she talks, when she comes upon these situations. Um, and a lot of us, probably looking at her as a character, can probably say, "Oh my, I did that once to somebody along my relationships with people. As I've gone along, I maybe have reacted the same way, in how it makes you look inside yourself, and what you're actually doing with people." So,
And I specifically remember my dad like always telling me, "You never know what is going on in someone else's life. Like you never know." And
you
so to
don't.
just treat people accordingly, maybe with kid gloves a little bit, because you just never know.
No, you don't. And there's no way of us knowing, and making assumptions the incorrect way can sometimes make the situation worse. And like you say, you need to step back and just think of, well, yes, I really don't know what this person's going through, but maybe there's some way I can help.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the pandemic, we've gotten away a lot from that, because we've all been now kind of isolated,
Yeah.
away from other people other than our families or very close friends that we see. Um, as a community, I think we've gotten away from how it how you should treat people outside, in the outside world. And it's kind of a this book kind of brings it back to, you need to be very aware of what your community is, how you can maybe view your community, and how you can bring people back in to being a community. So,
And that's why we're all here on this earth, really.
Yes, technically,
So,
yes. And, it's very true. It's probably, and that's the only way to say it. You need to help, or see people in the light in which you hopefully can help them either through bad times, good times, whatever. It just depends on what you want to do as a person. So,
yeah, and we would want to be treated that way ourselves going
oh,
through
yes,
something. So, just
definitely.
giving ourselves the grace to treat others that way too.
Yep. Yes, definitely.
Well, fantastic. Do you have anything else you want to add about that one?
No, not about that one. That one I think I'm pretty good with.
Okay, so that was Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout. And then what is your second book today?
So my second book is a lot lighter read. It's called Once We Were Brothers. It's kind of it's by Ronald H. Balson. Um, it's set in Chicago, which is really kind of interesting. The book is actually from Chicago. The author is from Chicago, and it's set in Chicago, and it's 60 years after the Holocaust. And the story is about two brothers from Poland who have survived the Holocaust and what has happened to them. So Elliot Rosenwig, I think is how we would say this,
Mm-hmm.
um, is a respected civic leader and wealthy philanthropist, and is accused by Ben Solomon of being a former Nazi SS officer named Otto Pitek, and he's known as the Butcher of Zamors. So, the reason why Solomon has accused him of being this Nazi SS person is because the true Piatek was abandoned as a child and was raised by Ben Solomon's family,
Mm-hmm.
only to betray him and his family during the Nazi occupation. But the book really kind of talks about, did Ben Solomon really accuse the right man of this crime? So Ben Solomon, his charges are dropped, but he hires a lawyer, Catherine Lockhart, who wants to help him prove that Rosenwig is actually Otto Petrick. So it really is kind of a mystery on top of discussions about the Holocaust, why the Jews did not leave Poland, why, how he got away, that kind of thing. So it really was an easy read for me. It was a fascinating read. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was hard to put down.
I was going to say, it was a page turner. I
It was.
have recommended this book to so many people. I would say
Yes.
it's in my top 10 reads of my
Yes.
life. And my
Mm-hmm.
husband loves it too, which he's not a huge reader, but he loves this book. So it is a fantastic read.
It is. And it kept me guessing. I assume it did with you, Kara, till
Oh,
the
yeah.
end
Mm-hmm.
as to whether or not he was this person, this dual personality, and was this actual Nazi sympathizer. To me, I didn't know it until the end. And
Yeah.
that's what, to me, is a great book. If they can carry you all the way through to the end and then reveal it, it really did keep my interest, which was really great.
Yeah. I have a confession to make. I actually have this terrible habit when I'm reading hard copy books that I will flip ahead to the end to know what happens. And then I proceed to read the rest of the book to see how the story progresses to get to that point.
Well, I can say I don't do that, Kara. You didn't learn that trait from me, so that's not
Nope.
one of my traits.
No, but I don't think I actually did it with this book because I read it so fast. I think this is for me when books maybe slow down a little bit and I'm like, well, I kind of want to know what happened, so I'm just going to flip ahead to see if I really want to, slog through the book or whatever.
Right.
But this one was such a fast read and so intriguing and kept me wanting to know what happened. So I don't think this was one of the books that I have done one of those bad habits.
Well, that's a good thing because I really wanted to just get through to the end, and that was, and it was very interesting reading about the perspective of, what each person was doing during the Holocaust. To me, it's such a it's such a tragedy in our civilization, but I think there's a lot of things that people have learned from that situation that have hopefully helped make us more kind, along the end. So it's hard telling, I really, it's kind of scary in a way, because there has been a lot of resurgence all of a sudden with anti-Semitism in this country. Um, and it's hard to believe that this is, we're almost going to come upon probably almost 60, more than 60 years of it. We're past almost 80 now
Mm-hmm.
years since the Holocaust has occurred, but there are still people in this country and across the world that don't believe that the Holocaust ever happened. And I just think that's a travesty. So I
Wow.
think people really need to continue to read books about the experience people had, whether it be Anne Frank, her biography, or this book, which was a light read, you could get through it, but understanding exactly what went on in those years, with the Jews and the Holocaust. And so I think it's important that that we don't forget it, and that we dispel anybody that's perpetrating a lie that it never happened, because it did. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
All right. So that was Once We Were Brothers by Ronald H. Balson. And then what is your last book today?
So the last book is The Language of Flowers by Vanessa Diffenbaugh. And this book, I wasn't real sure when I first started this book whether I was going to really like it. The reason why we did decide to read it in book club was because I also have a passion for floral and florists, and
Mm-hmm.
I was for a while a florist myself. So I have a fascination with flowers and what their meanings are, and why you give certain colors to people of floral. So this book does hit two notes. It hits one, that how flowers can play a part in a significant meaning behind their names, and they do discuss in parentheses what each flower means, or whatever else, as she's written this book. So the other story is that it is about Victoria Jones, who is an emancipated 18-year-old from foster care, and her journey to find happiness. The author has firsthand knowledge of this subject when she wrote this book, because she was in foster care herself,
Wow.
and she
Okay.
spent 14 years in the system after being abandoned by her parents.
Wow.
So this is more of a book, I think, where she wanted to write about her experiences, some of the things she may have been experiencing, maybe not herself, but other children within the foster care system do, experience. So when you first encounter this Victoria, it's her first day of emancipation from foster care, and it's where she has nowhere to go. She has no resources, and no one really cares about her, because after you turn 18, they send you on your way,
Wow.
um, with no net. In other words, what I would call to make your way in the world.
Yeah.
So in the book, it can be very depressing at times. It can be, you can have a lot of tissues with this book,
Okay. Good to
unfortunately.
note.
Yeah. So you might want to prepare yourself for that. Um, it goes through what she goes through. She ends up sleeping in a public park. She's tending a garden of pilfered blossoms and living by her own wits when she leaves foster care. Uh, Fortunately for her, she runs into a local florist who sees her special way with flowers, because as when she was in foster care, she bought one or two books on florals, In other words, flowers and what their meanings were. So the flowers do play a real significant meaning to her because she has this gift of helping other people through her flowers that she chooses once she becomes an assistant in this floral shop. So the connection for her to the world is through the flowers she gives and the meanings that she has for them, for the people that she runs into. It's a sad story, but it's a bittersweet story for me. It travels back between her past and her present, so you kind of have to get used to sometimes when you're reading it. Um, you're going back sometimes in her early life and then you're coming forward into the future. So it can get a little confusing, but I think it's a really great read once you start reading into it. But you start to see the reasons why she's making certain choices and how she's going to hopefully come upon some kind of happiness. By the end of the book, I was hoping she would find happiness because there was a lot of things going on in it, but I think it's really important that we understand, sometimes what other children go through
Mm-hmm.
that may not have parents and why they can get lost in the world and and being an educator, I think I've seen a lot of kids within my own realm of teaching that are lost,
I'm
by
sure.
either they don't have a good family structure and they get lost. And so this book, was, like I said, it is a little bit depressing. It probably wouldn't be a read that I would want to read if I was in a mood, to read
Yeah.
something depressing. Um, but I think it's a really important part of just what other people are experiencing within your community. She does at the end of the book, she's involved in an organization that helps foster children,
Okay.
because her being a foster parent child herself, and she is happily married, by the way,
Okay.
herself, which is great. And she has 3 kids of her own, and her kids are very successful. Um, so it does talk about some organization that she has sponsored or started up about helping kids, and I can't quite remember what it was. I'll have to.
Yeah, we could look it up and put it in the show notes. So,
Yeah, if you look up her as a person, as an author, you could probably find what organization she has started to help foster children, come through on their own, that kind of thing. So
it's not a memoir, right? Like this is a fictional account of someone else.
it's not a memoir. I think it's an introspective on probably other people that she has known through the foster care
Sure.
system, and in taking some of that experience and then developing a storyline, to kind of fit what what her point is, how we should understand these kids and understand, that they do need help, beyond once they have left the foster care system, what really happens to them. So I don't think it has really much to do with her life, because what I've read from her, she's married, she's extremely, I think she's out in Cambridge.
Okay.
She's got a great education. So
Okay.
um, I I think it's more of a perspective of what can happen, to
Sure.
certain individuals if they're, left to their own means, after they've been in the foster care system. So I think just to make the point, that it's not her life, but it can happen to other individuals when they don't have.
Yeah, and I'm sure she can draw
Yeah,
from her experiences, even if this isn't exactly, but the emotions and everything
right.
that comes with that. I'm sure she can draw from that and give us a really interesting, perspective on it.
Yes. And this too, she tries to make, this young girl does end up having a baby out of wedlock. And so there is some issues with motherhood,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not she should give up the baby because of the dire sense she's in. So, like I said, it's a pretty deep book. It touches on a lot of subject areas that are pretty deep, within the book. And like I said, I wouldn't read it if you're depressed or if
Okay.
you're having a
Make
mood.
sure you're in the right headspace for
You
this
got to
one.
be in the right headspace for this one. Yes, I agree with that entirely. And it wasn't. It took me quite a while to get through it because it was so emotionally draining at times. I couldn't read it, you know, full force. I had to put it away for a while and then get back to it, so that I could get myself in my own state of mind back, because it is that way. So it's a good read, but you hope, I think it just opens your eyes to another avenue of what really goes on in our society, with the foster care system. So,
Well, I really like that. And I also like that I would learn along the way because I don't know much about flowers myself. It intrigues me that they have all these meanings and different uses.
yes,
So I would like that I would be learning about that as well as reading this
it's
story.
got a, yeah, it's got a double meaning to it, which was more of my, um, the reason why I really wanted to read it was because of that, because I am interested. So, part of my retired life was, doing florals and, for people and, that kind of thing. So it really did pique my interest, as a whole to read, what they actually all meant, that kind of thing.
That's great. All right. So that was The Language of Flowers by Vanessa Diffenbaugh, or Diffenbaugh, excuse me.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to give you a little dessert pairing for a book. So to give you back a little something for coming on the show and giving me your time. And
Great.
I've been kind of thinking as you've been talking, I think that all of these books that you've talked about give us a real life perspective into looking at it might be walks of life that you know very well or different walks of life that you don't know very
Hmm.
well. But I think that's how they all kind of tie together. You can tell me if I'm kind of missing the point there.
You're right on point. No, that's very
Perfect.
true.
So one of the books that came to mind as you were talking, because we were talking about getting back to that sense of community
Hmm.
that I thought of. I just finished it and it was so good. It's called The Day the World Came to Town by Jim DeFeed.
Oh,
Have you read it?
no.
Okay, good. So what this book is actually set on 9/11, and this book is set in Gander, Newfoundland. And I'm probably mispronouncing that. Newfoundland,
Okay.
because they went through the audiobook like this is how you actually pronounce it. But what happened on 9/11 is as we all know, the US airspace was eventually shut down after the attacks on the World Trade Center. And there was all these flights that were already in progress when US airspace shut down. And
Okay.
most of the flights that this book focuses on are flights that were coming from Europe because you reach a certain point at the Atlantic Ocean where if you are going to the United States or Canada, like you have to keep going after you cross this certain threshold and you can't divert back to Europe. So a lot of these flights, I can't remember the exact number, but it was a large number of flights. I think like 400 flights had to continue on
Oh
to the
my.
United States, Canada, the North American continent. They
Okay.
had to continue on, but they couldn't get into the US, which was where, majority of the flights were going.
Sure.
So they were trying it starts out in the beginning with from the air traffic controllers perspective of like how they were able to divert all these flights and find places for all these flights to go and just the logistics of all that goes into play of all these flights being in the air and circling them, making sure they all landed safely. The second part of the book, then they go into Gander, Newfoundland, which is a small island off of Nova Scotia, and all of the flights that landed in this small town. Now, it used to be a U.S. military base. It is not
Oh,
anymore. So now it really
okay.
was just an island. And obviously, being an island, you don't have endless resources and shopping available to you.
No kidding.
So thousands, probably thousands of people land in Gander, Newfoundland, and this community that had to take them in and figure out what to do with these people for, I'm thinking it was 2 to 5 days, what they were going to do with these people. And school buses were picking people up from the airport. People were getting stuck on the planes on the runway for hours because, right, they're trying to do all the security measures to screen the airplanes, make sure there was no other terrorist activity on these airplanes. And so then the people of the community take in these people. They're sleeping in churches, they're sleeping in schools. The people of the community are literally bringing sheets and towels from their homes and
Oh
giving
my
them to these
goodness.
people. They're taking these people into their homes to have showers because they just didn't have the facilities
Oh,
nor the preparation,
oh,
preparation of
yes.
time to prepare for thousands of people to land in your community. And it will just restore your faith in humanity. And that sense of community where they all came together to do what they needed to do and just to make this terrible situation something great for these people. And it highlights a few different people as they're in Gander, Newfoundland. So you'll kind of follow
Okay.
people's stories. But it was such a good read. I'm almost like tearing up talking about it because it was so good.
It sounds like it. Oh my gosh. Because because I don't know where you were on 9/11, but I can actually remember
Mm-hmm.
where I was. And most people, our generation and your generation, can remember that because uh, it's it's was such a traumatic, you know, situation
Mm.
everybody was in. I mean, it wasn't just one part of the country, it was across the country, like you say, with the air flights, people trying to get where they were supposed to go, and people didn't know, certain things, what was really going to happen next. But what a great story about an island in particular trying to house these people. I can't imagine how that would even work. Like you say, all those planes, getting diverted and landing, it had to be an astronomical amount of food, shelter, what they were going to do with all these people. And like you say, it was a security risk because nobody really knew who was doing what
Mm-hmm.
initially in those first several days, whether or not they were terrorists or not on the airplanes. So, wow. Oh, well, that'll be a good read for me then. That's one that I will definitely read because I really am interested in how people step up to the plate, what I
Yeah.
call. When times get tough, sometimes people will just do what they have to do to help. And that's really important. I think, as a community, as a country and whatever else, we have to do those things. That's
Yeah.
just part of what we should be doing, to help one another. So
Yeah, and
great.
it's not a sad story. When I say I'm like I tear up as I'm talking about it, it's not that it's sad. It's just that the amazing amount of effort that these people put into making these people feel safe,
Right.
protected, cared for. Like in the situation where you were so scared, frightened, utterly stranded, and you can't get back to your home, and maybe you've been
No.
traveling for days and you can't get home, and you're not around your loved ones, you can't get a hold of anybody. And they really stepped up to the plate. And I love stories like that. And I've said this before on the show where it makes me think like, would I do the same if I was faced with that situation? And I really like stories that make me think like that. Because I
I
think
do
I
too.
learned from that to open up to be like, yeah, I can do that. And I want to do that. So if I am faced with a situation, maybe in a similar vein down the road, then I know that that's how I want to respond.
Well, I think it's really important that people see that. I mean, people talk about it a lot, but I think for yourself, like you say, Kara, you want to say to yourself, okay, if that did happen to me or I could help, I'm going to. This can be done. I mean, I can step up and do this. Um, because I think that's what really makes ordinary people extraordinary to me. If you're an ordinary person and you've never had to deal with this situation, but when the chips get down, you step up and you take care of, what you need to take care of. I think that's really an important trait to have within your personality, to help someone else.
Yeah. And I think to add to the theme of this book flight and this pairing is that we can only change the way we react to
Yes.
something, right? And the way that we show up in a situation. But again, I think learning about the other cultures, other people of the world, that's only going to help us be able to show up better when
Yeah,
needed.
I think so too. I think that's really, very true. I think, bad situations, can bring the best out of ordinary people. And I think that's really important, to know about us as a country, know to us about people as individuals, we would step in, to help. And, nobody knows what the future is going to hold. And hopefully we will be able to, step up and be counted when it's important. So that to me is a big thing with community. So I agree. But this has been absolutely delightful. Thank you so much for having me. I can't even tell you how much it is fun for me to discuss books with you.
I know this is so good. So, well, if you have maybe 2 more minutes, I actually have a
Sure.
couple other bonus pairings, I'm calling them, but it's a speed
Oh,
round of
good.
questions that
Great.
I would love to do.
Okay.
But let's really quick, let's recap our books. And don't worry, listeners, they'll all be in the show notes on the website. So you can find that. You don't need to write these down.
Right.
But the first book was Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout. The second book was Once We Were Brothers by Ronald H. Balson. And the last book of the pairing was The Language of Flowers by Vanessa Diffenbaugh. And then let's go ahead. We'll do our speed round of questions here. So, what is your favorite place to read?
Uh, I have a I actually sometimes I like the porch when I have, my porch out back,
Mm-hmm.
when the weather's capable, I read outside on my back porch. When I'm inside, I love my upstairs loft. I have an upstairs loft that I have that's kind of my room compared to my husband's den downstairs. So I love reading up there. Um, those are the two spots that I really like, favorite
And
places.
personally, knowing them, they're beautiful places. So I can see why. All right. And then what is one book you have read that has changed your life?
Oh boy. Ooh, that's a hard one. It really is. I would probably, golly, I don't know if it really has changed my life. I guess it's changed a lot of the books that we just discussed have changed how I think about,
Mm-hmm.
certain people or, how to react to certain situations. It's helped me probably become a better person, when I run into different relationships and things like that. So I guess there's not really one book that has really made a big impact. I think it's just everything I kind of read. I pick up something from each book that maybe will help me, become a better person.
I love
That
that. All right. And then I think you read mostly hard copy books. Do you do any
Yes.
audiobooks?
No, I
Okay.
have not gotten into that. During our book club, I was probably one of the last people that got a Kindle.
Okay.
Majority of the people had Kindles way before I did, because I just like the feel of a hard copy in my hands. It just to me makes the book more alive. I guess that's part. I think you can say a book is alive. It's an object, but it just brings it home to me more when I can read the actual words in a hard copy book instead of an audio. So,
Perfect. And then what are you reading next?
well, I'm going to probably read the book that you just suggested because I haven't read
Yay.
it yet. So that one I'm probably going to read. The last one I think I just read was something along the waves in World War II. It was a book.
Oh,
It was a small little paperback I picked up, um, and it was just about four women, and they actually were flight nurses, where they would go into enemy territory in Germany and pick up wounded soldiers and then fly them back on B
wow.
29s. So they were actually like emergency room nurses with, picking up soldiers that were on the battlefield. So It was a
Wow.
very good read. It was, it kind of gave me a perspective of one part of the service that I never knew actually was active
Hmm.
in World War II with Navy nurses. And it was a really good book. I
What
enjoyed
was the
it.
title on that one? What was it called?
That one is called The Flying Angels, and it was written by Danielle Steele.
Okay.
So it's a pretty easy read, um, but it has to do with four or actually six young flight nurses, but it goes through she does stories on them
Okay.
and what their job is over in England and things like that. So it was a pretty easy read. It's not that long of a book. And it's obviously the paperback I picked up. This is actually it is in paperback. It used to be like in hard copy, but now it's in paperback. So I just picked this up probably about 2 weeks ago. So
Okay. Well, thank you
yeah,
for sharing. It sounds
yeah,
very interesting.
yeah.
So, well, and then thank you so much for coming on to chat books with me today. I know your time is precious, so I really appreciate the time that you've given me.
Great, no problem.
Thank you so much for listening to Laura Osborne and I today in our discussion on her book flight, Improving Empathy Through Fiction. We'd love to hear what other books you might pair with your Improving Empathy book flight at bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find more information on today's flight and any other books that we talked about today. I want to inspire a community of readers. So whenever you share a post about what you are reading or what you are picking up next, especially if you have heard about the book on the show, please tag us. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Bookish Flights. This is a brand new show, so if you enjoyed it, please head over to Apple Podcasts and give the show a review. Your review not only helps me, but it also helps the show reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure that you will not miss an episode. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.